Good morning, everybody. This is John Scarborough. The topic I wanted to discuss today is going to be about making money on your farm in ways that you can save money. Okay, we're going to have another video about all sorts of different ways that we can actually increase income, and we can save income as well. But today's video is going to be about saving enough income to give you the in this case, we were able to save $50 an hour on this. And actually, it's probably better than that. We're going to give the example on this. So basically, what this is, these are chicken carrier cages. I'm going to open this up and show you inside here. It's a very simple cage. Okay, nothing complicated. All this is a crate that you put your chickens in to transport them to your slaughterhouse. So wherever you're going to get them processed, this is what you're going to put them in. You're just going to put them in this cage. And so the reason we were able to generate our $50 an hour, so to speak, is because to build a cage or to buy a cage right now that you're going to be able to put birds in, okay? You can put 5 birds into that transport cage. It costs about $85 right now. Okay, now that's the cages we're looking at. I already know that there are other types of cages, but I'm talking about a really good cage to put 5 birds in. And these are 5 bigger breed birds. So that's going to be any type of breed that's a bigger breed. Okay, that's going to get you up to an 8 to 10 pound bird. Okay, so any of your smaller breeds, you're going to be able to get more of them in there, but that's the case that we're working off of. This cage will hold 8 of those bigger breeds comfortably. You know, you could pack them in there real tight, but that's not what we're doing. So you can put 8 of those birds into there comfortably. Okay. So we built this cage for basically free. All of these nails that we use a lot of these nails here, we're able to get for, I'm talking about pennies for 100. Okay. Dirt cheap. We were able to get them somewhere and got them super cheap for that. And we used a few screws in certain specific places, but mostly we were able to use nails. But the big thing here is that we used sawmilled lumber, okay? So I know not everybody has their own sawmill, but the discussion here is about being able to do certain jobs. Not just this. There's other things you can do. So I'm not just going to give you this scenario. There are other things that you can do to save certain amounts of money. So we're going to go through this real quick. The reason we can do the math like that is that I know that this right here was worth, you can say $85 plus the extra 3 birds. So we save $85 for being able to transport 5 birds, but yet we could transport even more birds than that. Okay? The reason we're saying $50 an hour, because I built these cages in about an hour and 10 minutes. We're estimating $50 an hour, and that's for anybody that had to go buy this material. I didn't have to buy this material. I was able to cut it on the sawmill and get it virtually free, which is why I still calculate my time. That's why I'm saying that it took me about an hour and 10 minutes per cage to get this right. Now, the other plus side for me building these myself is I was able to build all 3 of these cages to fit perfectly inside of the back of our little truck. So it's not that we're not going to go buy some good plastic cages. Those cages are nice because they fold up, okay, and you can store them easy. You can see how if I had to build, if we needed 100 transport cages, that would rack up quick and a lot of space there. Okay, although people do it, okay? But this right here is still worth doing for me because I was able to save the money, okay? But I'm also able to build them to fit perfectly to my specific specifications. Now all 3 of those cages will fit perfectly in the back of that truck, and it will fill it all the way up. So I'm not wasting any room there. So that's one advantage there. And like I said, so this would be the equivalent of saving $50 an hour to keep you from having to spend that. If you had to go buy all those pieces of wood yourself, you'd be able to save yourself $50 an hour, keep yourself from spending that money. So why am I saying that it's worth $50 an hour? Well, you know that it took you an hour to build, okay? But here's the thing. Here's the best part. If you build that and you save that $50 an hour, that's better than making $50 an hour, okay? Because if you make $50 an hour on your farm, you make $50 an hour, now you have to pay income taxes because you had that income, okay? You have to pay, I mean, for me, I withhold a third, okay? Now, we try to get tax write-offs and all like that, but I always withhold a third of that money. I always pull that out and pretend that it's not mine. That's the government's money. That's tax money, okay? So the point is that when you can save $50 an hour, you're actually making more, because if I make $50 an hour, I have to pay a certain amount of that to the government as taxes. But when I save that, I don't have to pay anything, okay? Because that's money that I'm saving. You're not taxed on your savings so far, okay? Hopefully that doesn't become a thing. Now, there are certain types of businesses and stuff that's taxed on inventory and things like that, which is a type of savings. And that's a whole story for a different day. But the point is that if you're able to do work for yourself, this is just one example. We do this same principle in many other examples. So one thing that we'll do is we work on a lot of our stuff. We don't work on all of our stuff. But most of the time, if it's a four-wheeler problem, we will repair the four-wheeler, even if it's a deep problem, okay? Usually, if it's a problem with our brush hog, if something tears up on that brush hog, we will repair that problem. But how do we know? Okay, well, I'll give you one example. On my wife's car, something breaks down on that. 90% of the time, I do not even try to repair it. I take it straight to a repair shop, okay? Something breaks down on my truck. Probably about 80% of the time, I do the work, okay? I will take it in sometimes. So how am I justifying this? How am I doing the math to decide what is worth saving and what is not worth saving, okay? For anybody looking at the freezer in the background, that is actually an old junk freezer that we are currently using to build. We're using it as a platform to stand on when we build stuff. So anybody laughing at that, just want to put that in there, because we actually had a couple people comment on that freezer. Like, what in the world you got a freezer laying out there for? Well, that's what it's for. We use that to build. Okay, back to the topics. So we have a certain formula to calculate whether or not it's worth us doing all of the work and saving and getting those savings, okay? Because not everything you do is going to be worth those savings, all right? Obviously, if you go do a job and you can only make, say, I'm just putting random numbers out there, okay? Say you can only make $10 an hour, all right? But say you feel like your time is worth, we're going to have another video to show you what your time is worth on your farm. You can calculate that. We're going to do another video on that. But right now, let's just pretend that your time on your farm is worth $25 an hour, okay? But you see that when you go work on this, whatever it is you're working on, you can only make $10 an hour, okay? Well, obvious math tells you that you should probably go pay somebody else to do that rather than trying to do it yourself, okay? So for us, a lot of times, most of the mechanic work that we can do, like on our four-wheelers and things like that, that's worth anywhere from $85 to $120 an hour, depending on what you're looking at, depending on what mechanic you go to and all like that. Most of our four-wheeler mechanics, most of the four-wheeler shops and stuff, they charge about $120 an hour, okay? But you can't just calculate it by saying $120 an hour, because it's going to take you longer than it's going to take them unless you're really, really good. And if it is something you're really good at, here's another good example. Anytime I do welding work, I used to be a welder as a profession. I still do some welding work in my shop. I have all the tools that I need to. I have all the knowledge to do it. So it always makes sense to me. You know, I know that if I take anything that needs to be repaired to a weld shop, they're going to charge me about $65 an hour, okay? So when I do it, I know that I'm going to be able to do it most of the time, not every single time. There are some cases that this is not the case. Most of the time, I know that I'm going to be able to do it as fast, sometimes even faster than those fab shops, usually about as fast, okay? So I know, and that's the other thing, is you got to be realistic. You got to know who you are. You got to be honest with yourself. Are you really good at this? Are you okay at this? Or are you really bad at it? There are some things I'm really bad at, okay? Mechanic work is something I'm okay at. I have the knowledge. I don't particularly enjoy it, but I don't hate it, okay, at all. If everything goes well, then I can enjoy it. But that's a story for a different day too. So you do have to weigh out those options. Do you absolutely hate every minute of it? If you hate every minute of it, that's probably another good reason to consider not doing it, okay? So let's say for me, I have something break down on the brush hog that is welding stuff, which happens to me a lot because I have an older, wore out brush hog that I was able to buy for very cheap for some of those specific reasons, okay? So as a result, I have several things that breaks on it, okay? I would have to either bring that to somebody, or I would have to actually I would have to actually get them to come out to my place. If I got them to come out to my place, it's going to cost even more. So let's pretend that I took that to them. Well, now I've got to calculate my time of actually getting that loaded up and brought in to them, plus the time that I'm not going to have it because they may not be able to get right to it, and the amount of time that it's going to, the amount of actual money that it's going to cost me. So for me, on welding work, it's almost always going to be more beneficial for me to just go and fix it myself, even when I'm not necessarily in the mood, okay? Many times farming or running your own business, you do have to do things that you're not in the mood to do, even if it's something you like doing. You may not be in the mood to do it, okay? So that's kind of normal, okay? But I have to identify that almost all welding jobs, realistically, I'm going to save money if I do it myself. So what does that mean? Well, that means that if it would have cost me, let's say it was 5 hours of work and it would have cost me $65 an hour to pay somebody, plus the hours that I'm going to put into taking it up there, it makes perfect sense for me to take that and work on it myself at home, despite the fact that I'm not making any money while I'm working on that. But what am I doing? I'm saving $65 an hour, and I'm not paying income taxes because it's not an income. That's not an income. It's a savings. So a lot of times, especially in farming, and in some business, and a lot of businesses, this is the case, but it's not as important as it is in farming. Farming specifically, the money you save is sometimes the best money you can make, but you do have to sit down and do the math. So for me, this worked out. For me to build this, it worked out very good, because how many times are you going to be able to put wood together and basically save $50 an hour, okay? Now that doesn't, like I said, that does not necessarily mean that I'm against buying other cages. There are cheaper cages. I do want to mention that. There are cheaper cages out there. The biggest decision, like I said, was because I could make these fit my criteria perfectly, okay? So that's part of it. But I'm using these cages as an example, okay? So like on my wife's car, I mentioned that I almost never do the work myself. Occasionally, if it's something super simple, I mean, like there's a light bulb that went out or something, obviously that doesn't make sense for me not to go fix, all right? So that's something I'm going to take care of. But okay, if there's a fan, like a fan motor broke down on that car at one point, there was a couple different little odds and ends. It wasn't too crazy, but the car is really tight. It's really hard to work on. It's not easy to get around inside of, okay? So it's going to take me twice, if not 3 times as long to get that done. So even though that place that we take it to, our mechanic, is charging us $75 an hour, I think that's what they charge us, I know that they're going to get it done 3 times faster than me, okay? A lot of times they can get it done the same day, okay? Now, there is the obvious calculation of, okay, I do have to carry it in there, okay? I do have to take it up there. Usually that's not as much of a big deal. If it is, then you need to factor that in. So as far as, and I'm talking about farm businesses, I'm not talking about just everybody. Some people, it doesn't make sense for them to do their own mechanic work. Some people, it doesn't make sense for them to do certain things. So there's another discussion here that says, are you Are you so busy right now that you don't have time to build this? Say that you're making $60 an hour, okay? And these cages will save you $50 an hour, okay? Well, according to our tax math earlier, that's still worth building. But let's say that your time is maxed all the way out, that you're consuming all of your time, you're busy, you're doing a lot right now. Okay, we're all busy, but let's say that you are completely maxed out and you're using up all your time. In that case, you're probably making enough income that you need the tax write-off to go buy this, just go buy the cages and not worry about building them. Okay, so that's another discussion is also let's go back for a minute. Let's pretend that you're someone that your time is worth $25 an hour, like we talked about earlier. You can make $25 an hour. But like we talked about earlier, the job that you're looking at can only save you $10 an hour. But let's say that you've got a whole week, like if you're on your farm and you're farming or whatever it is, let's say you've got a whole week where you've got almost nothing to do. You're literally sitting on your butt. Okay, you're not doing, that there's just very little, there's a lull period, whatever, for whatever reason. There's a short period of time that you're not going to be doing anything. You know what? It probably makes sense for you to go ahead and save that $10 an hour. Even though your time might be worth $25 an hour, according to your hourly, what you're able to make, you might be able to make the $25 an hour. But if you've got a whole week of time that you're not doing anything, that means you're not making $25 an hour, even though you might be worth that $25. So if you know that you've got a period of time that you're not doing it, or if you have the time, it might be worth you going ahead and doing that $10 an hour job in order to save that $10 an hour. That's something you have to weigh out for yourself, okay? And that is an actual predicament that sometimes people will find them in business. You will find yourself in a certain place in business where your business is worth a certain amount per hour, but you aren't at the full potential that you would like to be at some point. You're not making as much money, you're not getting the work that you would like to be getting at the moment. A really good example to that is I was working with this guy one time. He was a welder. I was welding, he was welding at the time. And we had met each other working on this job. Well, then he ended up getting laid off just because the job got to where it didn't need as many welders. I was still working at the job. Well, he was going through a period. We were both working at the same, we were both staying at the same RV park at that point. He was no longer working. I was working. When we were both working, we were both worth $65 an hour at that point. Okay. But then he stopped working. He was in between jobs. His machine broke down on him. Okay. Well, what's he do? He goes and pays somebody else to fix the machine. That's not necessarily a bad case. I don't know how bad of a mechanic he was or anything like that. If he was a really bad mechanic, that wouldn't be worth him working on. But what my point is that if he would have been a decent mechanic, even though it may not normally be worth him doing that mechanic work, since he wasn't doing any work at that point anyway, since he was literally in a lull period, he probably could have gone ahead and just done the work. If it was me and I was sitting there for a week waiting for work, I would have just done the work. I would have just gone ahead and saved that money because it cost him I think it cost him like $800 to repair whatever it was he repaired. But yet he wasn't making any money anymore. And his justification, and this guy that I knew, he did know how to do the mechanic work. And even if he didn't, the job that was done was not a hard job. It wasn't hard it wasn't like it took a lot of knowledge, okay? It was mostly just labor. So the point that I'm making there is that he was worth $50 an hour, but at that moment he wasn't making that money. He was in that lull period. So if you find yourself in that, sometimes it is worth you taking on jobs and saving. Sometimes the savings is what it's worth. Okay, you have to save sometimes. All right. But on the flip side, like I said, if you're making a lot of money and you're really, really busy, many times that's where you need to pay somebody. That's where you need to outsource. And this is something that I've been guilty of myself is I've also seen people go and when they're incredibly busy and they're making good money, they still try to save too much money. In other words, they try to take on jobs that they really probably shouldn't have taken on. They probably should have paid somebody else, gotten that write-off, that tax reduction, and had gotten the much needed rest while focusing on the things that they need to focus on. So if you're really busy in your business, these kind of principles aren't necessarily something you need to pay attention to. They can be, but it's something, my point is that you really need to weigh out those options. If you're making really good money and you're really, really busy, sometimes it makes more sense for you to do what you're good at and make that money and then pay somebody else to do something that they're good at. Okay. So like a good example to that is even in farming. Okay. I try to do a lot of my own work, but there are certain problems so I can do decent mechanic work, but there are certain problems with diesel mechanic where if it's a diesel problem, if it's a problem with the diesel engine or something like that, sometimes it makes more sense for me to carry that truck or tractor to a diesel mechanic and let them do it, because that's something that they are specialized in. That's something they're very, very good at, okay? So I have to weigh out those options. I still have to load the tractor up and take it to them, okay, or the truck or whatever. So that I have to weigh all of that out. The problem sometimes, especially as a farmer, is that you're going to come to times where it's like, okay, it kind of makes more sense to go ahead and take this to that person, but they're not going to be able to get it back to me really, really quick. Okay. So that's another problem. And that's why I say that as a business owner, but especially as a farmer, there's so many different avenues that you're going to be going through. You need to know as much about what goes into your business as you can. You need to be able to be the guy that can pretty much do anything. That doesn't necessarily mean you're always going to, but you need to understand it. You need to have a good understanding of, you need to be able to be the guy or girl that can fill that spot, every spot in your whole business. You're not always going to have to do that. But the point that I'm really trying to make is that, as a farmer, there are lots of different places, lots of different jobs, lots of different things that you're going to do. You really want to try to get yourself to where you can do a lot of your own work at home and on your farm. You want to get to where you can do a lot of that, but you still have to do the math. You still have to know whether or not it's worth you doing every single time. And you have to weigh that out. So I hear so many farmers say to themselves, you can't count your time, okay? Maybe you can at first, but that does not mean that you shouldn't count your time, okay? Just because you technically can't every time doesn't mean you shouldn't. I count my time all the time, no matter what. I always count my time. That is true that sometimes you can't count your time. You've just got to put in the time and make it work, okay? If you got a farmer out there harvesting a whole huge field and he's sitting there doing math and he's like, okay, well, technically I stopped making as much profit as I would like to make, so I'm just going to leave the rest of this wheat out in the field and let it rot. He can't do that. He has to harvest all of it no matter what. So it is true that you cannot always count your time, but that does not mean you shouldn't. You should count your time, and if you find that it does not work out in your favor, you should be reevaluating what you can do to make it work in your favor. Okay? That's why, in this case, it worked very well in my favor to build these cages again, and I would do it. I would build these again. I would, because the time works out great for me. And that, there's all sorts of different reasons. It's because I have the right tools. I have good mechanic tools to do the mechanic work I need. I have good welding tools to do the welding work I need. I have pretty decent carpentry tools to do simple junk like this. And I have a good sawmill to allow me to sawmill all that lumber. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to need all of those tools for that job. But the point is that as a farmer, I am increasing my ability to do more work. The main thing is that I'm analyzing my time and that I am doing jobs that can make me as valuable as I can possibly be. Okay? If I could only make 25 bucks an hour on, let's say as a farmer I can only make 25 bucks an hour, but I was able to save 50 an hour, that's not just doubling my income, okay? Doubling because of the tax factor, okay? So keep that in mind, that there are a lot of different things you can do. Like, for instance, real quick, I'm about to wrap this up, but real quick, with the four-wheelers, okay? If I'm paying somebody $120 an hour, even though it takes me a little bit more time to get that done, it doesn't take me twice as much. But let's pretend that it took me twice as long to do it, okay? Even if it took me twice as long, that's still 60 bucks an hour for me. And if I felt like my time was worth, let's say 50 an hour, guess what? I am saving enough money in order to get that, okay? You get what I'm saying. My point is that sometimes, especially in farming, you're not always going to make all the money that you want to make. But if you didn't have to spend it, if you never had to make it in the first place, you know, everybody says, well, I need $100,000 a year. I need $200,000 a year. I need $50,000 a year. Well, what if instead of making, and I'm not against making more money because you need to make more money, but my point is what if instead of making that 50 an hour, what if instead you made it to where you didn't need that 50 an hour? What if instead of making that $200,000 a year, what if you made it to where you didn't need that $200,000 a year? That could be more valuable than making $200,000 a year. Keep that in mind. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to sign off. I hope this video helped somebody. I knew that it drug out a little bit, but I felt like some of the details were important. If y'all would like me to make any more videos like this following up, or if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Like and subscribe.